A rose is a rose until you steal it, and then it becomes a catalyst. All crimes are catalysts because they begin with a series of actions and then end with a series of reactions. Well, that is life, isn't it? Action and reaction. So we should choose our actions wisely. There's nothing like a good story to illustrate that crime touches more than the criminal and the justice system. And the story doesn't have to come from an Agatha Christie or a Raymond Chandler. Sometimes the story is ancient, like the old myth of Psyche and Eros. In the 18th century, that story morphed into a French story called Belle et Bête, known as Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast opens with a wealthy family going broke because of fraud and theft. The old father, a widower, and his 6 children, well, they have to sell their townhouse and move to a farm. Beauty takes action right away. She rolls up her sleeves and becomes the housekeeper and the cook. The 3 brothers become farmers. And the 2 sisters? They become complainers par excellence. Then one day the father hears that he may be able to reclaim a part or all of his fortune, so he has to travel to another town to find out. Alas, he is unsuccessful. On his journey home, the quite depressed father becomes lost in a forest, and then a rainstorm turns into a snowstorm, and, well, he's even more lost, until he spots in the distance a very strange and fantastic estate. The lost and hungry father is given shelter, food, clothing, and a treasure by an unknown benefactor. The next morning, as he walks to the stable to get his horse, he sights a garden with rose bushes. He remembers then that he had promised Beauty a rose. He wants to pick one of those beautiful roses, but there's no one in the garden to ask if that's okay. So he decides to go ahead and pick the rose. As soon as he has that rose in his hand, he hears a horrific, dreadful voice shout at him, "How dare you pick my rose?" The father turns to see this horrific-looking man, more beast than human, shouting at him, "You will die for stealing my rose." "No, please," says the father. "I only picked it for my daughter." "Oh, yeah. Well, let's hear from your daughter and see what she has to say about this. You go home, and with a month's time, you come back and bring your daughter with you. But here's the deal, dear old dad. She has to come here willingly." The poor father is in a conundrum. Who would have thought that picking one rose would cause so much trouble? It's not the flower, it's the theft. Poor Dad, he's on this roller coaster ride. First he was rich, then he was poor, but then his life is saved and he's given a small fortune. But then he picks one rose and boom! Now he or his daughter face a death sentence. It's a bit overwhelming. He returns home. He gives the rose to Beauty. Later on, after the month has gone by and he knows he has to go back to Beast, he relates the story to his family. Well, the two sisters, who do not like Beauty, blame her for the circumstance. Oh, well, you couldn't just have a nice new scarf or a new hat. No, Dad had to bring you something special, a rose. So good old Dad steals a rose for you, and now look where we're at. This is a complex story, yes? That's why I chose it to put it in a book I'm writing called Leadership in Literature. All the stories in this book, which are ancient myths and folk tales, are complex. They are stories that teach. Beauty and Beast is not a romantic love story. It is a story about redemption. It is biblical. It is profound in its theme. It's sexy in its plot. Leadership in literature is about identifying the aspects of leadership that most people don't look at, beginning with personality types, the training one needs, the call to lead, and taking a hero's journey. This is the technical stuff, I know, but I didn't want to write a textbook. I wanted to write a storybook which points out the technical stuff, like how a life can pivot on a theft and what to do about it. I also wanted to write about women in leadership, and what I have been noticing all these years as I've studied these stories more and more is how many women in these stories are the hero of them. Joseph Campbell, in his book, The Hero's Journey, talks about the calling that the hero answers before he takes his or her journey. Beauty is definitely called. Why, she is compelled. When her father must return to the beast's manor, she has to go with him because the inner workings inside of her tell her she is done with being the farmer's daughter, and she's sick to death of putting up with her sisters. Time to get out of Dodge, sweetheart. This is the call to leadership. By agreeing willingly to travel with her dad to the beast's estate, she has taken control of her life, therefore changing it. Beauty's journey isn't just a road trip, a traveling journey. Her journey is to learn how to love a highly flawed man who is himself on a journey. Dad soon leaves Beauty to deal with Beast on her own. Who is Beast? A guy, to put it in the vernacular, who was a complete asshole. A good witch took pity on him and literally turned him inside out. Wouldn't that be a wonderful trick, to be able to see who the monsters really are? Joseph Campbell also writes that many times the hero needs or has a guide. Buddhist philosophy says that when the pupil is ready, the teacher will show up. The guide or teacher reveals herself to Beauty in her dreams. Her message is quite clear. Looks can be deceiving, so don't pay attention to the outer person. Look inside. Get to know them. What are their actions? After a while, Beauty does begin to look at her circumstances rationally. By this process, she loses her fear. She realizes that Beast will not harm her. His actions are those of an honorable and generous gentleman. He never touches her, even though the two of them are alone in that house for months. By learning about one another, about their interiors, Beauty and Beast come to know one another on a very deep level. The end of the story, most of you know, that Beauty's friendship and her agape or universal love have influenced Beast. She has been his guide. Thus he becomes a whole man, a noble man. He is now ready to be the prince. Beauty, by losing her fear, completes herself. She will lead in her own right. In the French story of Beauty and Beast, the ending line is that both Beauty and Beast understand that their happiness is founded on virtue. And so ends the story of the crime of stealing a rose. All are redeemed. Thanks for watching The History Desk Speaks.